Finance Chief Choi Sang-mok is in Washington, while Trade Chief An Dok-gun has embarked on his U.S. trip, both for tariff talks with their U.S. counterparts tomorrow. For the presidential primaries, 3 contestants for the Democratic Party today held another debate vying for the spotlight, while 4 for the People Power Party are gearing up for a series of debates this week. Preparation is underway in the Vatican for the funeral of Pope Francis this weekend. When the mourning period is over, the process will begin to elect his successor. It's April 23rd, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok is in Washington, and upon arrival, he pledged to promote dialogue that will advance the bilateral alliance, while the Trump administration is in an apparent rush for some outcome. Kim Jong-sil has our top story.
South Korea's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok has arrived in Washington, D.C. for trade talks with the U.S. The discussions are set to begin at 8 a.m. local time on Thursday. This marks the highest-level visit by a South Korean official since the start of the Trump administration's second term.
We are here to initiate discussions that will further strengthen the South Korea-U.S. alliance. I will share the results of our talks on Thursday.
Choi's visit comes amid rising trade tensions, with the U.S. imposing reciprocal tariffs which will be imposed after a 90-day grace period, as well as 25% tariffs on steel, aluminum, and automobiles. Trade Minister An Dok-gun, on his way to Washington, expressed his commitment to addressing these issues.
In sectors like automobiles, where the 25% tariff has caused significant damage, we will work to find a solution as quickly as possible.
Minister An also mentioned that they're prepared for the possibility of a surprise appearance by President Trump, as seen in recent U.S.-Japan negotiations. The ministers will join discussions with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. The talks are expected to cover a broad range of issues, including the trade imbalance, non-tariff barriers like U.S. beef import restrictions, and even defense cost-sharing.
We are moving at Trump speed to ensure these deals are made on behalf of the American worker and the American people.
Experts in Seoul advise South Korea to take a measured approach for a better long-term deal.
We don't know if what Trump wants today, it'll be the same tomorrow. He may ask additional things in the near future. We want to make sure that if there is a deal, then it's a complete deal.
The expert also cautioned that the U.S. may be seeking a quick win for President Trump, which could lead to rushed decisions. With so much at stake, the outcome of Thursday's talks is being closely watched. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in what appears to be an attempt aimed at appeasing market anxiety, U.S. President Trump has reaffirmed prospects of a trade deal with China and rejected prospects of replacing the head of the Federal Reserve. Lee Soo-jin has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump is moving to ease investor concerns, highlighting optimism over trade talks with China while dismissing reports that he plans to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office on Tuesday local time, Trump emphasized that trade talks with Beijing were, quote, going well, and added once again that he maintains a good relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
My relationship with President Xi is great. It's been great for a long time. We've had a very good relationship, and I think we'll make a deal with China. If we don't make a deal, we'll set it. We'll just set the number. And
he also acknowledged that the current 145% tariff on Chinese goods was high, but said that while this will be reduced substantially, it will not be eliminated entirely. The Trump administration is actively ramping up trade talks, with the White House press secretary saying his trade team would meet with 34 countries just this week and that 18 trade proposals were currently undergoing reviews.
As I mentioned, there have now been 18 proposals in more than 100 countries around the world who are wanting to make a deal with the United States of America. So we feel everyone involved wants to see a trade deal happen.
When Trump was asked whether he had plans to fire Powell, he said he, quote, never did.
The press runs away with things. No, I have no intention of firing him. I would like to see him be a little more active in terms of his idea to lower interest rates.
This marks a sharp departure from Trump's recent pressure on the Fed chair to cut interest rates, last lowered in December. Just a day earlier, he escalated his criticism on Truth Social, calling Powell a, quote, major loser and suggesting he might remove him before his term ends in May 2026. Markets responded positively to his most recent remarks, with major U.S. stock indexes closing significantly higher on Tuesday, rebounding from Monday's steep sell-off triggered by Trump's criticism of Powell. 이수진, Arirang News.
Turning to the presidential primaries, the Democratic Party hosted its second debate today, while the People Power Party is gearing up for the next phase of the race. Our National Assembly correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
The Democratic Party of Korea's three presidential primary contestants held a second debate on Wednesday. Three topics were posed to the three candidates: their thoughts on the ongoing insurrection allegations, the livelihood economy, and inter-Korean relations. Regarding ending what the contestants called an ongoing insurrection attempt, referring to the martial law declaration, the frontrunner Lee Jae-myung emphasized investigating the truth and punishing those responsible, while candidates Kim Kyung-soo and Kim Dong-yeon argued that was insufficient, suggesting comprehensive social reform and constitutional amendment, respectively, as specific methods. This comes as the second half of voting started for the primary on Wednesday, with Lee Jae-myung in the lead with 90% of the votes so far. However, what's known as the Honam region, consisting of the Jeollado provinces and Gwangju City, as well as ones that open on Thursday, the capital region, Gangwon-do province, and Jeju Island, consists of around 80% of the total votes, room to turn things around. Meanwhile, the People Power Party started its second round as well. Kim Moon-soo, An Cheol-soo, Han Dong-hoon, and Hong Jun-pyo a couple of hours ago came together for a media day to kick off the series of debates for this round. There will be one-on-one debates, 2 on Thursday and 2 on Friday, and each contestant picked a debate partner. Kim Moon-soo picked Han Dong-hoon for the first debate on Thursday. An picked Kim Moon-soo for the second debate on Thursday. Han Dong-hoon and Hong Jun-pyo picked each other, making their debate a 3-hour-long one on Friday. On Saturday, there will be a 4-way debate as well. The matchup brings together a pro-impeachment contestant and an against-impeachment contestant, with An and Han being pro-impeachment and Kim and Hong being against. This round cutoff, for which the result comes on April 29th, will be decided with 50% eligible PPP voters and 50% on open survey. If a candidate gets more than 50% of the total, there won't be a runoff. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
With the rival parties' primaries now about halfway through, let us turn to our political correspondent Shin Ha-young for a closer look at where things stand and what variables could shape the rest of the presidential race. Ha-young, how are things going in the Democratic Party's primary?
Well, the Democratic Party is halfway through its presidential primary race, which officially began last week. And the party is currently holding a 3-way race with its preliminary candidates: former party leader Lee Jae-myung, Kim Kyung-soo, former Gyeongsangnam-do Province Governor, and Kim Dong-yeon, current Gyeonggi-do Province Governor. And the party has been conducting regional primaries across the country, where votes from party members and delegates account for 50% of the final results. And last week, voting took place in the Chungcheongdo and Gyeongsangdo provinces, where Lee Jae-myung, as widely expected, strengthened his position as the DP's top contender, earning nearly 90% of the cumulative votes from those regions. Now, the party is left with 2 more rounds of primaries. Voting began today in the Jeollado provinces, with results expected on Saturday. And voting in the Seoul metropolitan area alongside Gangwon-do province and Jeju will take place from tomorrow, with results to be announced on Sunday. And public opinion polls, which account for the remaining 50% of the final results, are being conducted over 2 days this week, and the final candidates will be announced on Sunday. And before that, the last televised debate among the 3 candidates will be held on Friday.
Now let's talk about the People Power Party's primary. Originally, almost a dozen have signed up for it. How far has the party gone in its primary process?
Well, the People Power Party had 11 registered candidates in the first place. Then the party narrowed down to 8. And yesterday, the PPP announced the first round cutoff, which was decided by a 100% open poll to have candidates who align with the public's expectations. And former Labor Minister Kim Moon-soo, four-term lawmaker An Chol-soo, former party leader Han Dong-un, and former Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo survived after the 8 initial contestants were cut to 4. And now the race is among 2 candidates who were against former President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment, Kim and Hong, and 2 who were for the impeachment, Han and An. And starting with the second round cutoff, 50% of the votes will be from eligible PPP electors, while the other 50% will come from an open poll. And this means those who were against President Yoon's impeachment could have an advantage. And the final candidate will be announced on May 3rd.
What are the factors to be on the lookout for?
Well, for the Democratic Party, frontrunner Lee Jae-myung's legal risk is one of the factors to be considered. The Supreme Court on Tuesday started reviewing the election violation charge against Lee as a full bench. And today, it announced that all the current justices will hold a second deliberation session on the case tomorrow. And this shows that the court is progressing in the case at unprecedented speed. And this also means the court is taking the case more seriously than others due to the level of public interest. And usually, Supreme Court cases are generally overseen by 4 justices. An initial guilty verdict was overturned on appeal last month. And if the top court finds issues with that ruling, it can send the case back to the Seoul High Court for a rehearing. And while this is unlikely to block his presidential run as it takes time, it could fuel a political backlash. And if there's no final ruling before the election and Lee wins, his presidential immunity could spark debate over whether the trial can continue. And for the People Power Party, acting president and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's unclear stance on a presidential bid remains a key variable. Though not in the PPP primary, speculation is growing that he may run as an independent. And in such a case, some political insiders believe a later merger with a conservative candidate could shake up the race. And there are concerns that his possible run is pulling the focus away from the PPP primary. And while some party candidates have voiced discomfort, others say Han's presence could still work in their favor. And if he plans to run, he must resign as prime minister by May 4th.
Right, Hayoung, thank you for the report. Keep us posted.
Will do. Thank you so much.
The funeral of Pope Francis will take place in the Vatican on Saturday local time, which will be a final reflection of his humble style. An Song-jin has more.
Pope Francis lies in a wooden coffin, wearing a red robe with a papal mitre on his head and a rosary held in his hands. Unlike his predecessors who were placed in a triple coffin, the Pope remains in a wooden coffin, which reflects the humble life he led. On Wednesday morning local time, the procession left the chapel of Santa Marta, the Pope's residence in the Vatican, to St. Peter's Basilica. It passed through Santa Marta Square and the square of the Roman proto-martyrs. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, Camerlengo of the Holy Roman Church, was in charge of the rite of translation, the process of translating liturgical texts. Large crowds gathered to mourn the Pope's death, carrying flowers and crosses while some prayed. The late Pope's body will be taken into the Basilica of St. Mary Major for entombment, but until then will remain in an open coffin until Friday at St. Peter's Basilica for mourners who wish to pay their respects before the funeral mass. The Vatican has confirmed that the Pope's funeral will take place on Saturday in St. Peter's Square. Royals and world leaders, including U.S. President Donald Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, have confirmed their attendance. Once the mourning period is over, conclave, the process of electing the new pope, will begin. Corriere della Sera, one of Italy's oldest and most read newspapers, placed South Korea's first prefect of the Vatican's dicastery for the clergy, Cardinal Lazarus Yuhung-sik, as a potential successor. The newspaper described Yu as a member of the Folklore movement who sought reconciliation between the two Koreas. Pope Francis appointed 80% of the cardinals who will pick the next pope. Though several contenders have been brought up, it is more likely to be narrowed down in the coming days. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, more babies were born in Korea in February, maintaining a promising upward trend for the 8th month in a row. Shin Se-byuk covers the latest findings.
South Korea reported a rise in the number of newborns for the 8th consecutive month in February. According to Statistics Korea's data on Wednesday, a total of 20,035 babies were born in February 2025, a 3.2% increase from the same month last year. This marks the first time in 11 years that the number of births in February has gone up compared to the previous year. But the pace of growth slowed from January when the country recorded its highest childbirth growth in recent years at 11.6%. The country's total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman is expected to have during her lifetime, also saw a slight on-year increase. It came in at 0.82, up 0.05 from a year earlier, with gains seen across all age groups from women aged 24 and under to those in their 40s and beyond. The number of marriages also continued to climb, with 19,370 couples tying the knot in February, marking a 14.3% on-year increase and the 11th straight month of growth, the longest upward streak since records began. Meanwhile, the number of divorces dipped slightly, down 0.1% from a year earlier. Despite the positive signs in the number of newborns and marriages, one expert cautioned that the recent uptick may be a short-term trend driven more by demographic timing than a fundamental shift.
We're seeing postponed births from the pandemic now taking place, and a large cohort of people currently in their prime age for marriage and childbirth. But that doesn't mean today's young generation is more inclined to get married or have children. So it's too soon to say this is a true upward trend.
He added that fundamental issues like soaring housing costs, job insecurity, and the high cost of private education must be tackled to see lasting change. Meanwhile, despite the rise in birth and marriages, the country still recorded a natural population decline. With 30,283 deaths reported in February, a 1.3% increase on year, the population shrank by 10,248. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
The second Trump administration's first 3 months in office have been marked by tariffs and continued tensions with its partner countries. In Seoul, a forum gathering prominent diplomatic officials and experts raised the need for America to build confidence among its allies. Our Oh Soo-young has this report.
Nuclear deterrence and alliances should not be neglected but bolstered by the United States as geopolitical tensions and global conflicts continue 3 months into the second Trump administration. That's according to officials and experts at the annual Asan Plenum in Seoul. As concerns grow over the lack of messaging on Washington's security commitment to its allies, Kurt Campbell, former US Deputy Secretary of State, raised the need for confidence building, noting North Korea's nuclear threat, Russia's potential use of nuclear weapons, and the largest nuclear buildup of modern times in China.
My own view is that over time we're going to need to do more, and we're going to need to involve our key allies, Japan and the ROK, more in decision-making around military and nuclear use, much in the way we did in Europe during parts of the Cold War.
Campbell also called for Seoul to have greater representation as an addition to the G7 or the Quad, saying its contributions to global governance are dearly valued. On trade concerns, as America rolls out reciprocal tariffs against its trading partners, the former diplomat expressed optimism towards the, quote, ingenuity and the determination by Seoul's trade officials, who have travelled to Washington, D.C. for ministerial consultations this week. Former US White House official Victor Cha said Trump has unlocked many new opportunities of cooperation that were previously unthinkable.
So the most obvious of these is shipbuilding, where the United States needs help. Korea is very successful in that area. Strategic energy cooperation, where South Korea doesn't need to rely on unreliable supplies from the Gulf, but get energy from the United States.
The annual discussion comes amid the need for the Indo-Pacific security architecture to evolve to meet the challenges of a new era, especially at a time marked by competing visions of order and leadership in Northeast Asia.
Highlighting 80 years since the end of World War II that liberated South Korea from Japan's colonization, Seoul's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-ho warned against naked self-interest that led to war in the past. As two key democratic players in the Indo-Pacific, Cho highlighted Seoul and Tokyo's dramatic improvement of relations over the past 3 years, saying their partnership is not a choice but a necessity. The two nations commemorate 60 years of normalizing bilateral ties this year. Amid the US-China rivalry, Cho said South Korea and Japan can encourage China's constructive role and prevent escalations in the region. Tokyo's ambassador to Seoul also called for continued trilateral cooperation with the US to strengthen deterrence and foster regional stability and prosperity. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Warm and sunny spring weather came back again all over the country today. Seoul and Jeonju rose up to 24 degrees, Daejeon 25 degrees, feeling a little hot today. It will be as warm as 20 degrees in Seoul tomorrow with clear air. With these warm conditions, you might wonder if ultrafine dust or fine dust will cover the skies. Looking at the ultrafine dust forecast tomorrow, we'll have good levels across the country. It will be perfect to enjoy outdoor activities. However, strong winds will make a return tomorrow nationwide. Tomorrow's Seoul will start off at 11 degrees, Chuncheon and Gyeongju at 9 degrees. Highs will move up to 22 degrees in Chuncheon, Daejeon, and Gwangju, 26 degrees in Daegu and Gyeongju. As the cold air moves south from the northeast, the temperature in Seoul on Friday will drop to 7 degrees. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.